Welcome to PhD&D, everyone. I'm Dr. Bowers, and let's talk about how to run a PC in 5 Acts The King in Yellow RPG. If you've been following this project, or if you've backed it on Kickstarter, you know that there's a fully illustrated free rule set that you can use to play the game, run the game, and enjoy it, and create your own scenarios for it. I've already released one video on how to run this game as a Maestro or Game Master, and now I want to do another video on how to run a PC, or just how to play this game. I realize this video might be coming out a little late, but I figured that since I already released a written set of instructions about how to run a PC, it's not as though I haven't given anyone instructions already. But let's get started in video format. I have 11 different sections on how to run a PC, 11 different little bits of instructions. And they are, first, what kind of game is this? Then, your PC's motivation, planning ahead, how to make skill checks, how to make strain checks, how to create a PC, what the different classes are, nightmares, waking up, consulting the stage play, and Act 5, The Phantom of Truth. So first off, what kind of a game is this? This is a storytelling game. That means that the point of the game's intended fun, is to collaborate and to make things up and to build on each other's ideas as you tell a certain kind of story. A weird tale with unreliable narrators. So this is not a game where the point is to cast fireball and do lots of damage. That's just not what kind of game this is. This is not a game that's really focused on resource management, like hit points and spell slots and things like that. It's a game where you have fun making things up. As for your PC, they have a very specific motivation, and this is important. Your PC has read the stage play The King in Yellow, and now they believe themselves to be royalty from beyond the stars, from outer space. They also believe themselves to have a supernatural ability, like a miniature little X-Men power. Now your PC's goal is to find others like you, others who are special and who have read The King in Yellow, and then, together, collaborate to conquer the world. And the way that you're going to do this is by consulting the stage play The King in Yellow together, and then finding the yellow sign and using its amazing powers. Get together, find the yellow sign, and conquer the world. That's your goal. Now, it is worthwhile to plan a little bit ahead, especially if you have played this game before. Later, at the game's end, you're going to look at the series of events that occurred during gameplay, and you're going to reinterpret them from another perspective. It's almost as though there's a kind of debriefing at the end of the game. When you do this, you're going to interpret the series of events during gameplay as if there were no supernatural elements at all. You're going to provide purely naturalistic, purely materialistic, scientifically compatible explanations for what happened, in other words. So when you're running your PC, look for opportunities to use your supernatural abilities, to act outlandishly, and to do things that might prompt someone to wonder, what happened here exactly? You shouldn't run your PC like an absolute maniac, and you shouldn't be so chaotic that you can't tell a story or work with the other players. But look for opportunities to be eccentric and to use your powers. Speaking of which, let's talk about skill checks. Whenever your character does something where there's a risk of failure, and that failure would be interesting, your Maestro will ask you to make a skill check. To make a skill check, you roll a group of 10-sided dice, or D10s. You roll them, and then you take the highest number among them. How many dice you roll depends on whether your PC is using their supernatural ability. If your PC is using their supernatural ability, you roll 3 d10s and take the highest number, but if your PC isn't using their supernatural ability, you roll 2 d10s and take the highest number. Now you might be wondering, why don't I just use my supernatural ability to do everything? Well, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but your supernatural ability starts out as pretty limited, and ultimately the Maestro is the final authority about whether you can use your supernatural ability to do a certain thing or accomplish a certain end. Now, once you roll your d10s and you take the highest number, you then look on a chart for where the number is. If the number was 1 through 5, that means the check was a failure. The Maestro describes how the PC fails to do what they were trying to do, and then the PC takes 1d4, or a 4-sided dice, worth of strain. This is like damage. More on this later. If the highest number rolled on the d10s is a 6 or a 7, this means that the skill check is a success at a cost. The Maestro describes how the PC succeeds partially at what they were attempting to do, and then the PC suffers 1d4 strain again. Finally, if the highest number rolled among the d10s for the skill check is an 8 through 10, that means the check is a success. The PC describes what they do, and it happens. Permitting, of course, that the Maestro admits of its possibility in the story. Now, if the skill check is a failure or a success at a cost, that means that the PC suffered 1d4 strain. And whenever a PC suffers strain, they make a strain check. To make a strain check, first add the amount of strain that the PC suffered to the total amount of strain that they've got. You can track this on the lower right part of your PC's character sheet. Once you've added the strain to the strain total, then roll a d12. If the d12 is higher than the PC's total strain, do nothing. Leave the strain there, nothing happens. But if the d12 roll is less than or equal to the strain total, you should erase all the strain and give your PC a monstrous feature. Describe how your PC is transformed in some way, and then note it on your character sheet, again in the lower right. Your PC can gain up to 3 monstrous features and remain who they are. A subtle monstrous feature, a blatant monstrous feature, and a critical monstrous feature. If they gain a 4th monstrous feature after that, they are no longer who they were. Write the word monster on the character sheet, and at that point the Maestro is either going to remove the PC from play if they're playing in the ultra hardcore mode, or, what is more likely, they're going to make sure that that PC has a worse ending than they would have had. Together, you can see how skill checks and strain checks work for a really interesting horror dice system. As your PC goes around trying to do things, the strain builds and builds and builds and builds, and as it builds, there's a continual risk of something happening as a result. It's kind of like the system that you have in Mothership or Ruination Pilgrimage, and it's exactly the system that you have in Spire and Heart the City Beneath. Now, with all that out of the way, character motivation and how to roll the dice and everything like that, let's talk about actually creating your PC. It's very easy. First, before you play the game, your Maestro should tell you what the game's setting is, the time period, the location, and so on. This setting may include specifications about what kind of person your PC is. They might be a student, or a researcher, or a janitor, or a biker gang member, or who knows. But take whatever the Maestro says when they describe the setting as a series of constraints on who your PC is. Now, once you've taken the setting into account, all you need to do to make a PC is come up with a name, choose a class, and then a brief explanation for why your PC is there in the setting. It doesn't need to be any elaborate backstory or anything, just a brief explanation for why they're there. I'm attending Brown University and I moved from Kansas. I joined the biker gang when I lost all my money due to gambling debt. Something like that, just brief. And that's all you need. This is not a game where you're going to worry about your ability scores, or which skills you have, or how many spell slots you have, or anything like that. This is not a resource management game. It's a storytelling game. So really all you need is a name, a character class, and why you're there in the setting. As for character classes, we've got 4 now, and we have plans to introduce at least 4 more in the future. The 4 classes we have now are based on the first 4 stories from Robert W. Chambers' anthology. There's the Repairer of Reputations, that is based on the character from that story. There's the Pallid Mask, that's based on Boris from The Mask. There's the Organist, which is based on the creepy organist from In the Court of the Dragon. And there's the Grave Worm, which is named after the churchyard watchman from The Yellow Sign. And these classes differ from each other only in one way: what their powers are. And I guess also kind of what their overall theme or flavor is. But it's mainly about their powers. If you choose to play the Repairer of Reputations, that means you have the power of blackmail. Once per hour, you can force another human being to do something. Anything within their physical power. It's only once per hour, it's only one person, and you can't get them to do anything miraculous or supernatural, but still, that's your ability. If you play as the Pallid Mask, you have the ability to turn living tissue into stone. There's a limitation on this. The amount of tissue you can affect is about the size of a house cat. You can also affect things other than living tissue. If you wanted to, you could turn a block of wood to stone, for instance. But the power's most horrific expressions come from targeting living things. Like the Repairer of Reputations, the Pallid Mask is limited to using their power maybe once per hour. As for the Organist, they can manipulate space and time to small degrees. Once per hour, they can rewind time for a few seconds and cause an event to play a second time over, or they can teleport a small distance. And when it comes to the grave worm, they can cause things to rot and decay just by touching them. Again, they're limited to once per hour, and they can only affect a target or an area that's about the size of a house cat. Our game uses a metric system. It's the system of house cats. Each class's powers start out really limited at first, but once your PC finds the yellow sign, your powers are going to grow to be unlimited, or at least limited only by their general flavor. The Repairer of Reputations is no longer somebody who can force one person to do one thing once per hour. Instead, they can command an army of millions. Likewise, the Pallid Mask could petrify a whole city block, or the Organist could teleport the planet Earth itself. Things get wacky once you find the yellow sign. And indeed, once your PC finds the yellow sign, you should really lean into the fun of making up crazy, exaggerated, epic, impossible-sounding things that your PC does. For at that point in the game, things should be going off the rails and the game should be coming to a close soon anyway. Now, concerning particular moments of gameplay, let's talk about nightmares, waking up, consulting the stage play, and Act 5, The Phantom of Truth. On the topic of nightmares, sometimes your PC will find themselves in a literal nightmare. When that happens, there's a few things to remember. First, in a nightmare, your goal is to survive. That's it. Don't set your hopes on killing all the monsters that bedevil you, or removing the emergency that threatens you, or anything like that. Chances are you're not going to be able to do that. Your goal should be to escape, survive, endure, something like that. Second, every time you make a skill check, which is either a success or a success at a cost, roll a d4, an additional one. That d4 is the amount of damage or strain that you inflict on the nightmare itself. That's right, every nightmare is kind of a situation with hit points. As your PC makes checks that are successful or partially successful, this constitutes them surviving or enduring or making their way through the nightmare. The set of hit points that the nightmare has, we call the nightmare's resistance. Most nightmares have a resistance of 10, but ultimately it's up to the Maestro to decide. And once a nightmare's resistance reaches 0, once it's reduced to 0, the nightmare is over, and the PCs wake up. On the topic of waking up, at some point in the gameplay, your PC will do that. They will wake up from a nightmare, and it's going to be up to you to describe where your PC wakes up, what their environment is like, and what they're doing or what's going on when they wake up. And because this is a storytelling game, remember, you don't really need to ask the Maestro what there is or anything. On the contrary, you should make that stuff up. So don't ask the Maestro, is there a musical instrument where I wake up? Instead, just stipulate, I wake up next to a musical instrument. Don't ask whether there are luxurious curtains where your PC wakes up. Instead, just stipulate, I wake up next to some luxurious curtains, and so on. The Maestro can impose limits on what you describe, ultimately in the interest of keeping the mood a certain way and keeping the story grounded in a certain way, but they really shouldn't be doing this that often. And remember, check your character sheet. In the middle column at the very top, there should be a tip about what kind of place your PC should wake up in, depending on their class. Now, once your PCs have woken up and once they've convened somewhere, at that point, your PCs will need to consult the stage play, the King in Yellow, that document that they're so obsessed with. When it's time to do this, the Maestro will tell you. He'll say, you've come together, and so it's time to consult the King in Yellow, or something like that. And consulting the King in Yellow, the stage play, is a 4-step process. One PC first finds an illustration in the King in Yellow, a portentous illustration. Then another PC interprets that illustration as a set of instructions. Then the next PC leads the rest in following those instructions. And the last PC is going to deal with the chaos that results from following those instructions. Now, you don't need 4 PCs to do this thing. You could have the tasks alternate between 2 PCs, or 3. But ultimately, it's that 4-step process. Find an illustration, interpret it as instructions, follow those instructions, and then deal with the resulting chaos. Each one of these 4 steps requires a skill check, and the first 2 steps can only be made without any supernatural powers. In making the first 2 steps, in other words, you can only make skill checks that involve 2 d10s, not 3 d10s. This is just because, in general, your supernatural abilities are not going to help you interpret a book. So to begin, one PC flips through the stage play and finds a scary illustration. To do this, their player just imagines a scary image and describes it to the table. If it's your turn to do this, just focus on what the scary image is. Don't worry about how anyone's going to interpret it or anything like that. Trust me, the gameplay is most fun if you just keep your mind on the image and ignore the other steps. make sure that it's pictorial, just describe the image. And if you're having trouble thinking of something, just describe a horror movie poster that you've seen, or the cover of a horror novel that you've seen. That's good enough. Now, to confirm that your scary image is the one that the other PCs are going to interpret and all that, you do need to make a check. You can't use your special supernatural ability for this check, so you need to roll 2d10 and take the highest number and consult the chart and all that stuff. If your skill check is a failure, that means that you didn't find the right image, and it's up to the next PC to try to do what you were doing. But if the skill check is a success or a success at a cost, you've found the right image, and it's up to the next PC to interpret it. Now, if it's your turn to interpret the illustration as a set of instructions, there's a really simple trick to help you. Just propose that you are being instructed to bring about or create whatever's in the illustration. So if the illustration is of a city on fire, propose that you are being instructed to set fire to the city. If the illustration is of a severed head, propose that you are being instructed to cut someone's head off, and so on. Now, if the image is something that is absolutely outlandish or unrealistic, or wouldn't make sense to try to literally bring about, talk about what that image is a metaphor for, and then how you want to bring about the thing for which it's a metaphor. So if the image is of a dragon ripping a human being apart, you could say that the dragon represents a certain gang, and the human being being ripped apart represents another organization, and that what you're being asked to do is incite violence between them, or something like that. If the image is of something that could be literally brought about, say that the instructions are to bring it about. If it's not of something that could be literally brought about, think of what it could represent metaphorically that could be literally brought about, and say that the instructions are to bring about that. That's ultimately a way to kind of handle that in an easy and methodical way. Now, as in the case of finding an illustration, you're going to make a skill check to do this, and you're going to roll 2d10s because you can't use your supernatural ability to make the skill check. As before, if your check is a failure, then it's up to the next player to propose an alternative set of instructions as the interpretation of the illustration. But if your check is a success or a success at a cost, that means that you found your instructions, and it's up to the next PC to lead your company in following them. Now, if you are the PC who's leading the other PCs and following the instructions, you're in luck because you can use your supernatural ability. You can roll 3d10s instead of 2d10s, increasing your odds of success, and you should feel free to do outlandish things that involve the use of your supernatural abilities. Go extreme with it, get people's attention, cause a spectacle. And once you do, or I should say, once you try, you make a skill check, and assuming you succeed, it's up to the next PC to manage the chaos. After you've followed your horrific plan based on a horrific image, you're probably in trouble, in danger, or both. There's a riot, the cops are on the way, you're now in a burning building. Whatever it is, if your PC is the one dealing with the chaos, your goal should be to find a way to get out, to escape, to reach another safe place where you can keep consulting the stage play. And you can use your supernatural abilities to do this, so the chances of success are higher. You're going to consult the King in Yellow a few times, 3 times over the course of gameplay. Your PCs will have a couple of nightmares over the course of gameplay. And ultimately, in Act 5, when the game comes to a close, you're going to do something a little different. In Act 5, after your PCs have been arrested or killed or abducted or have conquered the world, the Maestro will describe a scene or a series of events that take place later. The Maestro will go around the table, asking each player to describe what really happened during the events of gameplay. And here, your goal should be to describe what your PC was doing, what they were achieving, how they were doing it, but without any supernatural events or occurrences. If your PC gained any monstrous features, start with those. And I would say reinterpret monstrous features as injuries. So if during gameplay, your PC had a monstrous feature of claws, and they were running around attacking people with their claws, then in Act 5, you might interpret your PC as having severely injured fingers, so that the bones of their fingertips were exposed and they ran around saying, "I have claws, look out!" If your PC used their special supernatural ability, focus on that and redescribe the use of supernatural abilities as acts of desperation. How did the repairer of reputations get past the guards if he couldn't blackmail anyone? Did he just run past and say, "Can't catch me"? Did he pull out a Glock and threaten the guards? What did he really do? What really happened? And as you go around the table and as different players fill in different reimaginings of the game's events, you're going to find yourself telling a weird tale with unreliable narrators. It seemed as though your protagonist had read The King in Yellow and got embroiled in some supernatural drama, but in point of fact, there's reason to believe that they actually were just very distressed individuals. And which of those stories is the real one? Which one takes priority? I promise you, it's really fun to talk about at the end of a game of 5 Acts The King in Yellow, and it's ultimately up to you, the players and the storytellers, to decide. So that's how to run a PC for 5 Acts The King in Yellow. What do you think? Do you have questions? Do you have rules issues? Let me know in the comments. Thanks very much for watching. Don't forget to do all the internet things. Click like and subscribe. Don't forget to hit the bell icon if you want notifications about new videos on this channel. And thanks!